back, everyone. No matter where you are, no matter what time it may be. I hope y'all are doing well out there. This upload, in my opinion, is a bit of a special upload. These encounters you're about to hear didn't come from your regular submitters, such as people hiking, camping. These came from people we're supposed to call when something goes wrong. The ones trained to deal with emergencies. The ones who usually have an explanation for everything. Firefighters, paramedics, police officers. But sometimes even these people run into things that no training manual could ever prepare you for. You're going to hear about firemen who saw something watching them through the flames. A deputy who answered a prowler call and met something he could never write into his report. And a medic who found out the hospital parking lot wasn't as empty as it looked. These are raw. These are real accounts from men and women who don't get rattled easily. And yet they left, shaken to their core. Before we jump in, I want to thank you all for being here and for listening. And also, if you're listening and you've had an encounter of your own and would like to share it here on the channel, be sure and reach out to me. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. My email address will be linked in the description below this video. Alright, legends. Lock in. And let's begin. Everyone grab a drink. Lock your doors and windows. Hit the lights. And let's get started. Reels. I've been sitting on this story for a number of years now. It was 2004. I was a volunteer firefighter in a rural part of southern Ohio. We didn't get a lot of action compared to the city guys. Maybe a house fire once in a blue moon. But mostly it was chimney fires, fender benders, or helping out with brush burns that got out of hand. It wasn't extremely exciting, but I loved it. It was something I believed in. Neighbors helping neighbors. That kind of thing. Something we need more of today. It was sometime around the end of November. I remember because the air was definitely getting colder, and when you stepped outside, you could definitely tell winter was on the way. My pager went off around 11 p.m., jolting me awake. The call was for a barn fire out past the edge of town. On this call, it was one you know before you even get there, that the structure is probably going to be a complete loss. By the time I put my boots on, grabbed my gear, and drove out, you could see the glow in the sky from miles away. That's how hot this barn was burning. When I pulled up with the truck, the whole family that owned the place was standing outside. All of them safe, but they were completely panicked, understandably. The farmer was red-faced and he was shaking. He kept shouting that he heard something big inside the barn right before it went up. His wife was trying to calm him down, saying all the animals were already out in the pasture. He wouldn't drop it, though. We started laying lines, setting up to protect the house, which was only about 50 feet away from the barn. I remember the heat being so intense, it felt like your skin was cooking even through the turnout gear. I was on nozzle, waiting for water, when I caught movement at the edge of the trees beyond the fire. A normal individual would think, that's another horse and it's been spooked by the flames. But it didn't move like any horse. This thing was froze in position and standing upright on two legs. I was also froze with the nozzle in my hands, watching as this figure stepped out just enough that I could make out a few small details. This creature was enormous, 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Its shoulders were broad and it was covered in dark fur that caught the light of the fire and made it shine. Its head was shaped like a timber wolf, Its arms were extremely long and looked almost malnourished. They were way too long for any animal or man alike. It was standing there on two legs, just like it was spectating the whole event. It only stood there for a few seconds, but I don't know how to explain the look. The eyes locked onto me. I could feel a physical heaviness of this thing's gaze. It was like my body just wouldn't move, like I was pinned in place by something that I couldn't understand. It's like its very stare alone could lock you down. It turned in this weird motion that did not look natural and just walked off into the woods. I thought maybe I'd lost it from the heat and exhaustion, but when we finally got the fire under control, one of the older guys, a 20-year vet, mind you, came up beside me. He didn't say anything right off. He just stood there looking toward that same tree line. Finally, he said, "You saw that thing too, didn't you?" Another guy actually overheard, and he nodded without a word. 3 of us had seen it. But when the chief filed out the incident report later, the cause was listed as electrical, and there was no mention of anything unusual or strange. I asked him about it once in private. He shut me down hard, said if I wanted to stay in the department, I'd keep my mouth shut about what I thought I saw and things that are above my pay grade. Which was ridiculous in itself. I was a volunteer. He definitely seemed a bit flustered and was crossing his words and mumbling. I don't think this warning, or whatever you want to call it, came directly from him. I think word got out and it came from somewhere higher up. That's just an opinion, of course, my observation of the events. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. But all of this seemed to tie up too convenient. There's one thing for certain. Now looking back, I know for a fact that farmer was telling the truth. There was something in that barn before it went up. I just wonder if he ever saw it too. And a question that needs even more attention. Did that thing somehow, some way, have anything to do with how that fire started? Sadly, we'll probably never know the answer to that question. But if you're hearing this and you think I'm full of crap and these things aren't real, I don't know what else to tell you. Name withheld. This email was subject line, the EMT crash encounter. It was back in 2011 when I was working as an EMT in Pennsylvania. Our shifts were 12 hours, and a lot of what we did was routine transfers. Nursing home to hospital, hospital back to home. But every so often, a call would come in that was a little more exciting, a little different. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning when dispatch sent us out to check on a car accident on a county road that runs through nothing but a lot of thick woods and farms. A state trooper was already en route, but we were closer, so we went ahead and went. When we pulled up, the scene didn't make any sense. Immediately, the car was nose down in a shallow ditch. The hazard lights were still blinking. The windshield was busted, but the airbags hadn't deployed. The front end didn't look like it hit anything major. The driver, a man in his late 20s, was standing outside the vehicle. He wouldn't get near the car. I went over to check him out to look for injuries. There were no major injuries. He had a couple scratches on his face from the glass, but he was more scared than hurt. I asked him what happened, and he just kept saying it ran me off the road. I figured maybe a deer, a bear, or something had ran across in front of him. It definitely is something that happens a lot. But when I pressed him on it, He shook his head. It wasn't an animal. This looked like a big person, covered in hair. Now you've got to understand, I wasn't the guy to entertain nonsense like that. I wrote it off as shock. We walked him back toward the ambulance so I could get his vitals, and that's when the troopers showed up. The guy tried to explain it again, said something tall, wolf-headed, came out of the trees and charged toward the car, claimed he swerved and went off the road to avoid it. The trooper gave me a look over the guy's shoulder. You know the kind of look. Like, here we go. We got us another crazy one. But then something happened that wiped the smirk right off both our faces. While we were standing there, the woods just all of a sudden went completely quiet. Then, a pretty good distance out, something heavy started moving in the brush. We could hear it, walking. This thing definitely did not care who heard it. We all stood there. The trooper put his hand on his sidearm, not knowing what to expect. My partner grabbed the flashlight off the rig and the driver started babbling. He kept saying, "That's it. That's what I saw." The beam from the flashlight went across the ditch and into the trees. For a half second, we saw eyes. They were bright amber-colored and very high off the ground. They blinked, shifted quickly, and then whatever it was moved deeper into the woods. This wasn't something moving on four legs. It was clear to hear it was walking upright. The trooper finally said, "Get him loaded and clear the scene." That was it. No investigation, no tracking, nothing. No one was about to go anywhere near that tree line. We just got the driver in the ambulance, and the trooper wrote up something in the report later as single vehicle accident. Driver swerved to avoid animal collision. Back at the station, my partner and I tried to talk about what we'd seen. But it went nowhere. He just shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter. You know they don't want that in the report. It's nonsense." The driver ended up being fine physically, but mentally, I don't know. The way he kept repeating himself in the back of the ambulance, like he was begging us to believe him, that's ultimately stuck with me over the years. I never actually saw it, but the way he kept rambling and going on and on, I truly believe this man saw one of these things. I never believed or even knew what a Dogman was before that night. I didn't even know what one was supposed to look like. But whatever was standing in those trees on two legs, it was watching us, and it was big, way bigger than a human. I'll never forget it. And no one can convince me of what I never saw, but I heard, and this guy was definitely not lying. There's no way. I refuse to believe that. There's too many people coming forward and claiming the same thing. If it has feathers and it walks and quacks like a duck, then most likely you have a duck on your hands. Reels, I think what you're doing is very valuable and very rare. I truly believe you have honest, to God, good intentions. And I do believe you are helping people. Continue on, sir. A concerned EMT, Pennsylvania. Hello, Reels. My encounter goes back to 2016, when I was part of a volunteer search and rescue team in upstate New York. We trained year-round, but real calls were hit or miss. Sometimes it was just hikers who took a wrong turn. Other times, it was a bit darker. Missing persons that didn't end well. One weekend, we got called in to help look for a middle-aged man who hadn't come home after going out to scout deer stands. He was supposed to check in with his wife before it got dark. But when midnight rolled around and she still hadn't heard from him, she called it in. By morning, we had a crew of about 20 people combing the woods near where his truck was parked. It was late, fall, damp, patches of wet leaves and mud that made tracking a lot easier. I was with a partner about a quarter-mile in when we spotted tracks in a soft patch near a creek. I thought they were bear prints, but the longer I looked at them, the less sense that made. Each one was huge, bigger than my boot, and I wear a size 12. The shape just did not look right at all. They weren't round like a bear's paw. They were long, very elongated, actually, with a heel and defined toes like a human footprint. But the toes, you could tell, ended in deep punctures into the ground, like where claws had dug in. It chilled me to even look at these. I could feel the hair on my neck standing. They were in a straight line, not staggered like an animal on 4 legs, but left, right, just like a man walking through. We followed them for a bit, and then they veered off into thicker woods. The stride length was insane. Whatever made those tracks was covering ground way faster than we could. I called it over on the radio, told base we found some unusual prints. The response came back almost instantaneously. Disregard. Continue grid search. I remember just standing there, staring at my radio, thinking, what the hell? We were trained to follow any sign, but this time we were flat out told to ignore it. My partner just said orders are orders, and we moved on, but neither of us liked it at all. The missing guy was found later that evening. He was alive, but definitely shaken up. He was sitting near a old logging road miles back from his truck. He was covered in mud, and he was acting like he'd been through hell. He claimed he got turned around and panicked, but when I tried to ask more, he wouldn't even look me in my eyes. He just kept saying he didn't want to talk about it. He just wanted to go home. Later, back at the firehouse, I had actually taken a few snapshots of these prints. A couple of us were talking and we were studying the pictures. The senior SAR coordinator shut us down. He saw the pictures and almost forcefully made me delete them. He said we don't report things that will cause problems. Stick to the training. His tone made it clear we weren't supposed to push on this issue. That was the first and last time I saw any prints like that. But I know what I saw. I had pictures, and I know we were told to look the other way. It doesn't add up to me at all. I stayed on that team another year, but after that I stepped away. Not because of danger, but because I realized there are rules no one explains to you until you cross them. Rules that I don't necessarily agree with. I understand if no one believes me. I know it seems suspicious, but I'm telling the truth. And I want people to know due to safety reasons alone. If someone else was telling me this story years ago before I saw those tracks, I would push it off and say it's nonsense. But I saw what I saw. It wasn't a hoax. Those were real tracks. They were clear to see. It's definitely took a toll on me mentally. Now every time I walk into the woods, I catch myself looking at the ground more than I used to. If those prints show up again, I want to be ready, and there's no one going to stop me from making it public. If I get a chance, I will publicize this event. Former SAR volunteer. S. New York. Reels. I won't give my name or exact locations of this event due to, well, obvious reasons. It was 2008. I was a deputy in Wisconsin. Out there, we got a lot of calls where it was domestic disputes or you would get livestock loose on the highways. Every so often, we'd get what we called prowler calls. Somebody hearing footsteps around their property or seeing shadows near their barns or tree lines. We never really put things together until after a lot of these calls started coming in that year in 2008. We received way too many of these prowler calls. It definitely was not normal. One night, I myself got dispatched to one of these calls. It was a woman living alone. Said she'd heard something big walking around her house after it got dark. She claimed she could hear this thing breathing heavily outside of her bedroom window, and she was afraid to pull the curtains to look. I drove out there. It was just her and this little farmhouse lit up in the middle of all that black. She met me at the door. This lady was scared to death. Said whatever it was had circled the place for at least half an hour. She swore that it wasn't a human. I did a walk around the property with my flashlight. The ground was wet from rain earlier, so I figured if anyone had been out there, I'd find some boot prints. But the only impression I saw was a very strange one. It was big and looked like a human's bare feet, but with claws dug in at the tips. I'll be honest, I didn't know what to make of it, so I didn't say anything. I was standing near her back fence when I saw some movement out of the corner of my eye. I swung the light, and sure enough, it hit something that was alive and breathing and moving. This something was very tall. It was standing just inside the trees, trying to hide, I suppose. It was watching me. It was probably 6.5, maybe 7 feet tall at the most. It had a very wide chest, and its body was completely covered in what looked like dark fur. The light just barely caught it around the face area. It had a long snout. I could see pointed ears, and its eyes were reflecting a yellow color when the beam hit them. This thing never ran when I spotted it. Didn't even act like it was startled or surprised. It stood there swaying side to side slowly, breathing very heavily. After a brief stare down, it turned and walked away, as slow as could be on 2 legs. I stood frozen until it was gone. My first instinct was to chase it, but there was no way I was going into those woods by myself with that thing out there. When I got back inside, the old woman asked me what I saw. I told her it was nothing, probably just a big dog, and she gave me this look like she knew I was full of crap. Back at the station, I mentioned it to my sergeant. He seemed to get a very serious look on his face and basically told me it's best not to put that in your report. So I didn't. Officially, it was another prowler, unfounded. I never stopped thinking about it. I know what I saw wasn't a dog. I feel for that old lady. I wish there was more I could have done, but obviously it never came back because she never called again. This sure as hell wasn't my imagination. It was standing right there directly in my light where I could see it clearly. After that year, those weird prowler calls seemed to die off. It's something that makes me think that maybe these things are migratory and they just move through the area. I'm not really sure. Just speculation and observation. I'm truly glad I found your channel as I listen to others as well. I try to learn what I can to figure out exactly what these things are because I know they're real. I saw one. Every time someone occasionally brings up those weird prowler calls or someone mentions wolfmen or creatures in their yard, I get rattled. I keep my mouth shut and listen intently. Inside, I know these people are not all making this up. Some of them, sure, maybe. But I know some of them are telling the truth. Anonymous. You can use this if you want. You have full permission. Just leave out any names if you can. I would appreciate it. I was a paramedic for almost a decade in western Kentucky. This was 2013. Our station was attached to a small regional hospital, and a lot of nights we'd sit in the rig outside waiting for a call, drinking horrible coffee and listening to the radio. Nothing special about that night in particular. It was early in the AM hours. I can't be certain to name a specific time, but it was late. It was a very clear sky out that night, and it was a quiet where you can hear the vending machine humming 20 feet away from you. My partner had gone inside to grab a snack. I stayed in the rig, door open, scrolling on my phone. Out of nowhere, the hairs on the back of my neck stood. It was the same feeling you get when someone's staring you down. I thought maybe one of the ER staff had came out, but when I looked toward the trees at the far edge of the parking lot, I saw something crouched there that wasn't ER staff. It was low to the ground like it was trying to stay hidden, but it was too big to really do that successfully. I thought, is that a big dog? As soon as I thought this thing slowly started to rise and it stood up. It straightened up on two legs and it had to be 7 feet tall at least. It had bright yellow eyes and the head of a dog or a wolf. Let's just say canine. Its body was completely, well, not completely. It was covered in light gray, almost silver fur. But around the chest area and on the legs, the fur was super thin and I could see this weird leathery skin underneath. This was definitely something physically really there. This was not a costume. This was not a prank or a prop. This was something breathing and blinking. It looked like around the neck and the sides of the face it had really thick, long hair. It reminded me of a lion's mane. I could see its hands on its front arms or legs. It looked like human-shaped hands but stretched out longer. It was weirdly flexing its fingers, making a fist, then opening its hands over and over. I'm no animal expert, but this thing was displaying behaviors akin to wanting to attack me or showing aggression. It seemed angry for no reason. The look it was giving me was a look of hatred, a look of disdain, like it hated me for reasons I was unaware of. I sat there in the driver's seat, hand halfway to the radio but not pressing the button. It stood there, staring straight through me. It finally started walking, like it owned the damn place. It crossed the edge of the parking lot, never breaking eye contact with me. I could still see its claws flexing on its hands as it moved. It passed behind one of the ambulances parked down the row, and when it came out the other side, it had dropped back into a crouched and slipped position on all fours. Then it just went off into the trees. It was gone, and it never made a sound. When my partner came back out a minute later, I was still gripping the steering wheel. He asked me if I was okay, and I couldn't even get any words to come out. I didn't tell anyone for a few weeks. When I finally mentioned it to an older medic who'd been there a lot longer than me, all I said was, "Have you ever seen anything weird out here in the parking lot at night?" He just stared at me and shook his head, but he would not talk about it. I don't know if he knew what I meant when I said something weird, but he sure acted like he did. That's when all of it hit me like a bus. This wasn't just some freak thing I'd seen. I think others had seen it as well, and we were all keeping quiet for reasons I don't know. I guess what matters is I'm coming forward now. When you see something you can't explain to anyone, you don't know how to approach the conversation, so you just stay quiet. That is, until you find a group of people like this group, where you feel comfortable enough to come forward and you're not going to get ridiculed or belittled. Now, if you or anyone's wondering, I do still work EMS. But I park a lot closer to the doors now. I haven't seen it again. I don't sit alone in dark lots anymore either. When people laugh about Dogman encounter stories, I just keep my mouth shut. Because late that night, in that hospital parking lot, I learned the hard way that these are all not just stories. Thank you, Reels. P. Western Kentucky. Hi, Reels. I hope writing this down helps not only me, but others who seek to find truth. I know that's all I seek. I'm trying to nutshell it. The encounters are many. I think they might be related somehow from the 1970s to 2025. Let's get started. My name I won't give here because I get the feeling as I bring this into the light, there are those who don't want it there. So you can call me Raven. This happened back in the late 70s. I had fled my boyfriend. I had to. Something, call it God, call it personal angels. Something was watching over me because I left with very little money, a jacket, and the clothes on my back, ballerina slippers on my feet, and the faith that everything would be fine. Fast forward a bit. I was able to stay in a small cabin in a place called Heart Lake near Guthrie in northern Minnesota. It was late August, early September. The weather was getting cool at night. My friend, a deputy for the Cass Lake Police Department, worked the overnight, so I was able to stay a few nights and watch over the cabin and his dog Nick, a beautiful and very shy Malamute, whose doghouse sat right below the bedroom window at the back of the cabin. The cabin sat amongst 2 or 3 other rather decrepit little cabins in the owner's home. This used to be a small resort. It had a nearly unused landing for boats. The cabins and house set in amongst the trees, the forest encroaching on all of it. The area to this day is mostly woods, some farmland and hay fields, but mostly forests, tax forfeit, and state land. Very wild. The sun had set, and we'll call my friend Joe. He left for his overnight shift. I'd say it was somewhere around 9:30 or 10 at night. I remember I was tired and looking forward to a good night's sleep. I laid down and drifted off. I have no idea how long before I was dragged up out of sleep by a growl, but I had been so far down that I couldn't tell if maybe I had been dreaming. So I lay with my senses alert, waiting to see if the sound would come again. I was feeling a bit uneasy, so I got up, fumbling to find the light switch. I found one, flicked it on, and it lit the kitchen, which sent light into all the little rooms of the cabin. I went to the sink, running water for a drink and looking out the window into the night. Besides the inadequate outside light of the owner's home, it was very dark. I drank some water and set down the glass when the growling returned. It was a deep and rolling sound that rattled the floor underneath my feet. My mind went to the dog, Nick. The growling was coming from the direction of where his shelter sat under the bedroom window, so I'm thinking it's Nick. I had never heard of Dogman. I had heard of Bigfoot, but that was the farthest thing from my mind. In my mind, I'm thinking Nick is facing something down, so I decide to go get the dog. When I think about it now, it's not very bright, but I had no real reference to cryptids of any kind. The growling was so unusual for this shy, timid guy. I was afraid for him. In fact, I had never heard anything so deep that it vibrated floors and set off every alarm your senses have. My only thought was to get the dog. So out into the night I went. It's so long ago now I cannot remember if I had a flashlight, but I must have, because I remember coming around the side of the cabin to the back and following the chain from the stake to his shelter against the back of the cabin. He was all the way in the back, and I had to drag him out. The look on his face was, "Are you crazy?" I did notice there was no shadows cast to my right, where there were shrubs and trees. It was just black, just one roiling mass of black. I unhooked the chain and, hanging onto his collar, quickly walked back around to the door and into the cabin. When I let him go, he scuttled into the bedroom. After I locked the door, I found him under the bed, and he was not coming out. I turned out the light and felt my way back to the bed where I didn't lay for long before I was hit by a feeling of dread. It took hold of my senses, making sure I knew it was there. From the window above my head, I observed first tiny orb-like lights filtering in through the window. Then they slowly grew in size, some white, some bluish, others a light orange, beautiful to look at but awful and dark in feeling. When people say they feel evil with these beings, believe them. That description fits. It's penetrating in a way that seems to move you toward a state of panic, like you are being tested. Just how much of this mean, evil frequency are you going to be able to take before you break? Just a brief pause to give this person applause and credit for how they described that. I could not have described that feeling any better. That is spot on. Bravo. I sat up with my back to the wall underneath the window, cross-legged. First I prayed, calling on Jesus, and the feeling got worse. Then I started visualizing light around me, strengthening its boundaries around me, visualizing mirrors facing outward so whatever was before me could see nothing but itself. This took a lot of effort and time, more like a tug of war. Honestly, it felt like I was trespassing on its territory and only my own effort was allowed. I was being tested. Nothing, not Jesus, nothing but myself. I either passed the test or I would be broken. I had never been put in a position like this, but I kept working on the mirrors and light, staying away from fear. These were the only things that began to slowly neutralize its power. Just before the sun rose, I felt its hold drop. The test was over, and I had passed its test. Dogman? Was this Dogman territory? Anubis tests or weighs the heart of man. I don't know, it's a question. It was not until later in my life that Dogman became a possible answer. Little did I know that in a strange and unusual way I had become a part of someone else's story. Here's the next part of the story. Use it or not. It's up to you, Reels. The next day Joe comes home and tells me that if I would like, I have the opportunity to babysit a cabin and a German Shepherd while the owner visits his family in California. The little house sits on about 40 acres just outside of Guthrie, so not far from Heart Lake and the above incident. I remember the driveway was long. On the right side sat a brushy swamp, and to the left, pastures, its boundaries and old worn sections of barbed wire and rotting wood posts. A long time since anything was pastured there. Then to the right, the little one-story house, blue in color, came into view, appearing to sit on the highest point on the land, which wasn't all that high. We parked the truck and Joe unlocked the door and showed me around his friend's place. I didn't mind no running water and splitting wood to cook and heat. It was an adventure. It had electricity and the dog was huge, almost black, maybe one of the best-looking German shepherds I had laid eyes on. About 30 inches at its back. We were fast friends and all seemed good. His name was Jaeger. I had been there a few nights when in the late morning someone drove up and knocked on the door. The dog Jaeger came with me, and as I opened the door there stood a native man. Jaeger stood between me and the man. I remember his name. I will show you reels, but we don't repeat it here. We will call him D. He introduced himself. "Hello, my name is D." Out of nowhere he starts telling me about himself, and I'm thinking, who does this? Who knocks on doors and tells you their history? He says I'm half Ojibwe, and my older brother took me to our people's sacred ground, a place of testing. It's there. He points back over his shoulder where my people still have the rights to rice on Heart Lake. When he said that, I was dumbstruck. He went on, "Yeah, my brother took me there. He didn't say why. He brought me into the woods not far from the water and left me. It was getting dark. I was told to stay put, so I did. Something came. It tested me. I was young, very young. I will never be the same. It did something to me." How would this man know to come here and talk openly about what had happened to him if he didn't know that I had a similar experience? He said, "Hey, that dog, will he attack me?" Jaeger stood taller, looking the man in the eye, and I said, "He will." D stepped back, and I felt the return of evil. Jaeger gave a low warning growl. D turned and got back in his car and drove away. I was stunned. What the HE double hockey sticks was that? The worst part was that I knew he was coming back. For me. I knew, like I knew my name. While I was pondering this, it wasn't long before I heard Joe's truck coming up the drive, so I looked out, and sure enough, it was Joe. He came inside and I told him what had transpired, in fact telling him the whole story, all of it. He brushed it off. Then I said, "Look, this guy is coming back. I know it." Joe brushed off that bit of information faster than the last. I was thinking, why would someone think I was making this up? How do I get him to believe me? This guy is coming back. As I'm thinking on this, him standing there in his deputy's uniform and badge, I'm thinking that attitude doesn't make for a good cop. We can hear a car coming up the drive. I told you, Joe, he's back. I said I cannot remember exactly what Joe said, but it was something about how this couldn't be the D guy. The car stops, you hear footsteps come to the door. The dog growls quietly, and there's a knock. Joe opens the door, and there stands D, looking at Joe and saying, "I thought you would be meeting me at the door with a gun." The two of them stared at one another, Joe stunned as he realized I was right. Joe took him outside, talking to him. I couldn't hear it all, but D left, and Joe taught me how to use his friend's gun. Well, there you go, how it all begins. There's more. Let me know if you want the rest. It's gonna be a long one. Thanks again, Reels, and thanks for doing what you do. But most of all, doing it well. Raven. Friends, legends, family. That's going to wrap up this upload. I want to thank each and every one of you for spending your time here with me. Whether you're a long-time legend of the channel, or this is your first video you found, I can't thank you guys enough for listening and supporting what I'm doing here. I also want to thank these individuals for stepping forward and being brave enough to share this with all of us. Hearing these stories from people who have spent their lives facing emergencies, firefighters, law enforcement, medics, it hits differently. If even they walk away rattled, it makes you wonder just how many other encounters have been swept under the rug or buried in reports that will never see the light of day. I added Raven's story because it was so compelling. It did involve a deputy, but in a small part, I suppose. I just had to include it because, again, the descriptions, everything, a very compelling encounter. It deserves a lot of attention and even more thought. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. We have been blessed with so much growth recently, and I owe every bit of that to you. And remember, if you've had an encounter, you can always send it in. You know how to get in touch with me. Everyone stay safe out there. And even if you're listening and you're a skeptic, please carry protection when you're out in nature. No one should ever be out in the middle of the woods with no protection. It's just reckless. Don't do it. Just weigh your options and consider the possible outcomes. That's where I'll leave you. I love each and every one of you. Until next time, my friends, watch over your loved ones, keep your head on a swivel, and as always, good night.